Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Diverse Thinking, Different Learning podcast. I am excited that you're here, and I am so excited to have a returning guest on today's episode, Michelle Porjes. Michelle is a licensed educational psychologist and expert in executive functioning. Last time we had a fantastic conversation about executive functioning skills and how they impact learning, and today we're taking that discussion even further. Michelle has written a guidebook called Navigating the Yearly Calendar, Executive Functioning Month by Month Guidebook, which is designed to help parents and educators support children in developing essential executive functioning skills throughout the school year. So think about it. What if we could structure time management, organization, and planning skills around the natural flow of the academic year? That's exactly what Michelle has done in her book. And today we'll talk about practical strategies that families can implement now as we enter the months of March and April. Let's get started.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Michelle, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me back again.
I am so glad you're here. I was looking back and you were on it right at the very beginning when we launched the podcast. And now we're at, over 200 plus episodes. So again, it's so great to have you back here. I think the last time you were here, we talked about executive functioning very broadly. I think you were the first person I had on to discuss that topic. And since then, you've done a number of different things. You continue to support so many students. And the reason why I wanted to have you back is because you wrote this amazing month by month guidebook, which we're going to be talking about today. But tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write that month by month guidebook on executive functioning.
Well, thank you again so much for having me on. So one of the things that I've noticed in my journey since I pivoted from being in the school is, executive functioning is sort of a hot topic. But the other thing is it's a really normal topic. Everybody needs executive functioning and everybody needs some training in it. It's kind of like cooking. You might be really good at cooking, but training in cooking will make you even better, right? And so executive functioning is the same idea that there are people and children that are inherently good at staying organized, following directions, sort of managing their own upset. And some need some more tools or some more strategies. So originally when I pivoted, I started to not only research, but use what I had been using, but also think about how do we make it simple? How do we make it efficient? And how do we have strategies that are easy to implement and have big results? And that was really kind of the get-go of all of this. Then, as I sort of went through a couple of years as a private practice person, I started to realize what I had said at the schools when I talked about the rhythm of the year, when I used to work with teaching assistants, was true for executive functioning, that there is a rhythm of the year. Certainly some things you need to do all the time, but there is a rhythm of the year. And certain executive functioning need to be used at different points in a more sustainable way. For example, if finals are in December, studying becomes a much more important executive functioning skill, or breaking down the studying or setting multiple study times, than it is, let's say, in September when there's no test. But organization in September or understanding time in September may be more important than in January. So, that's what I did. And then as I sat down to sort of write this book and think about month to month, because there are some month to month books out there, particularly for beginning teachers, what you should do in this month or that month. I started to sort of collaborate with myself, actually, but then bring together these ideas and think about how do I want them to be put month to month, and when do I want certain things to be revisited based on the three overarching ideas of managing time, stuff, and information.
Right. And I think that is kind of the brilliance of the way you've organized the book. I have seen and read a number of books on executive functioning, but the way it's organized is so helpful when you pair that with the rhythm of the school year. And I'd love for you to talk about how aligning executive functioning skills with the rhythm of the year can make a big difference for students.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that that's a really important question. So, when I work with kids in schools or when I was in a school, the year does have a rhythm, right? In September, it's all about setting the routine. It's all about getting back into the rhythm. It's about, do you have the right materials? Do you remember sort of where we left off last year? In January, we sort of hit the mid-year blues. You and I have done a podcast on that. Or February, March, Farch, like how do we get through that? Or May, right? When you're kind of done, you sniff summer, but you're not really done. And the older you are, there's a lot of assignments and then finals come in. So I sort of took that model. When I take that model, I go, okay, what skills do we need to get there? And how do we sort of put those skills in? But in addition to that, there's certain things that you have to do every month, like making sure that you set up a monthly calendar. I see a lot of people go, yeah, we have a calendar and the calendar's sitting there and it's in September and they're in March. So are we using it? Because one of the things that frustrates, I think, parents and teachers is when they say stuff like, but I taught them, but I bought them, but it's not being used. Well, you also know what to do when you go to the gym. But do you do it? I don't know. But that's where coaching sort of comes in, or the reminders. And my hope for this is each one is one page, or maybe two, that people will look at it and go, oh, wait, stop. We got to do this. We got to go through a backpack and pull out the papers you don't need. Oh, wait, let's check pencil supplies. So one of the things that I'm known for is I'll say we don't argue over pencils. We don't argue over paper. We just put in more. Somebody's going to benefit from the last pencil. Don't you worry. So we don't argue. We buy 500 pencils from Amazon or somewhere else when they're on sale, and we just put 3 a day in there. We don't argue for that. Why? Because that's a tool that you need all the time.
Right. Let's talk about where we are in the academic year. It's March right now. When it airs, we'll be approaching April. Are there some key executive functioning skills that tend to be most challenging for students during this time and things that they may need to pay attention to?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. So I'm actually looking at the book right here on my I think there's a couple of things about March into April. For many schools and for many kids that are older, it starts the third quarter or the fourth quarter, depending on where you are. Some kids are on a tri-quarter system or a tri-semester system. So a couple of things. For example, the school schedule and the after-school schedule sometimes shifts. March, you're on summer or spring sports, right? So baseball takes up a lot of time, much different than basketball does. Or maybe you're in the last play of the year or the last performing arts choir or something like that. So being able every time at those key marks like March or April, re-examining the after school schedule and making adjustments. So like when am I going to study? So one of the things that I work a lot with families is these kids need to have a block of 2 hours every day, Monday through Thursday, to get work done. Maybe that block shifts a little, right? We're going to change clocks here, at least in California, but maybe that time is not 4 to 6. Now it's 6 to 8, or it was 3 to 5. Now it's 5 to 7, depending on the practice. So that becomes important to make that adjustment. And the other thing, equally as important, the weekends. I don't know how many times I say there has to be time set aside on the weekends. If it's not a finals time, particularly for a high schooler, it can be once on the weekend, but it's a slot of 2 hours that there's plenty to do. Number one, there's usually some homework. You can't get things done, or studying for tests, or organizing, or looking ahead, or looking at the calendar, or making sure that you're ready for whatever's happening on Monday. So again, looking at that schedule and saying, when is that block of time on the weekend that I'm going to get weekends done? So that's something there. The other thing that is sort of a reminder, I like to do a lot of reminders, and I want to give everyone who's listening a free one because I think it's really good. And it's the following: show me, don't tell me. Show me, don't tell me. And here's what I like about it. Often parents will say to a kid, did you do it? Yeah, I did it. Turn it in? Yep, good. That's not always good enough. Number one, it can really not be true. And it is just waiting for somebody to catch them. Number two, it's actually not helpful for the kids because kids, how many docs you're submitting. You might think you turned it in and you haven't hit submit, or you might think you did it, but you're thinking in your mind about something that was a week before. So when you say, show me, don't tell me, you have to produce the results because executive functioning is all about where the evidence is. Well, show me you did it. Oh, here's the math paper. Great. Go have your free time now. You submitted this assignment. I did, and but it's not really needed, and I didn't really need to do that. All that negotiation kills executive functioning. It actually makes the task 10 times longer. So show me, don't tell me, a great thing to start in March or April or May when the momentum of getting work may be changing. It may not be as high because we're sniffing summer or, kids get into it, doesn't matter. That's a whole other thing. And then the other thing related to this is listening to things like when the kids say it's only worth 5 points. I get full credit. This is really optional. It really doesn't count. From executive functioning, the first get-go part is completion of work. Grades are later. And that's simply because a lot of grading up through high school is based on did you do the work or not. Of course, doing well on the test is important, 100%. But if you're doing well and you turn your work in and you're getting reasonable grades on the test, you're doing fine in class. That's just all there is to it. As we get into April, again, we're always going back through the system. So what school supplies do we need? By now, pencils can be this big, or the highlighter doesn't have a cap anymore, or the whiteboard marker can't be found, or the calculator's out of batteries, pick one. I don't have any paper. Going through backpacks. By now, maybe some people went through backpacks in December. So there's papers at the bottom. Some are just wrapped to be filed. Making sure that you have sort of a system for that. And then the other piece, which is a huge piece of executive functioning, which I really push, is this idea of self-regulation. How do we regulate? And I just met with a student yesterday. Now he wants too much time to regulate, meaning I want to do something for 2 hours and have the rest of the day off. It doesn't really work like that. But being able to have some time to reset the system, right? Because March, there's a lot going on. And I know they're getting ready for their vacations and their time off. And I always tell the kids, there's push times. And before a vacation, those are push weeks. Vacation. Hey, we've got some tests, some quizzes, some papers, some extra homework. I need those grades because it's going to be off for 2 weeks. No judgment on teachers. Smart on the teacher's part. But that's push weeks. You push, and then you can go off for vacation. So reminding the kids, when we push, we're going to feel a little less regulated. So how can we get ourselves regulated? Maybe it's breathing. Maybe it's getting outside. Maybe it's taking a little bit more of a brain break. Maybe it's making sure that we hydrate.
I love that. I mean, there's so much about what you've said that is so important. And I love the idea of really revisiting where they are, revisiting their schedule at specific times. I mean, you talked about, the backpack, looking into the backpack in March and getting those papers that, probably should have been submitted in October. They're still sitting at the bottom of the backpack. Pencils need to be sharpened, erasers need to be replaced. All of those things are so important. But then also paying attention to the change in the schedule that you mentioned. And I was thinking about my own kids. My daughter has 3 days of volleyball practice a week plus games. My son has 3 days of basketball practice a week plus games. But then once the season's over, all those days open up. And so things will change in terms of how they're spending their time. And maybe even if kids have a similar schedule, now there might be time to, increase some executive functioning work, do some catch up, do some skill building. And so revisiting the schedule is so important. And I love that you said that.
Yeah, it really is. And what I will add to this that I think is important, that everyone needs to do. Number one, use executive functioning skills as an adult. It doesn't stop after college.
Oh my goodness. It's ongoing. It's ongoing.
And even as an executive functioning coach, there's times when I screw up. That's fine. We need to make mistakes to humble ourselves. And I'm always looking for more efficient ways to do things. But in the summer, you use a lot of executive functioning skills. So that's why June, July, August, they're there. Particularly July, which is sort of the dead of the summer where there's not a lot of anything school going on. So that's a time when people really check out. But there's a lot of executive functioning that goes on. And if you've ever sent your kid to overnight camp, boy, do they need to know, right? They got to get themselves to the dining hall and they've got to keep their stuff organized in their bunk. And they've got to make friends and deal with being really exhausted, and not losing it, a campfire, things like that.
Absolutely. And there's so many of these different seasons. And the challenges that students face with executive functioning will differ. You mentioned, spring break is approaching for a lot of students. And one of the issues that many students have is task initiation. Then, so how do you come back from vacation and be motivated to start working, get back into studying and doing your homework and doing all the things that you need to do to continue to excel academically, right? How do you get back into the rhythm of school? And so that becomes important as well, right? In giving you time to readjust.
And one of the things I say, and again, I don't apologize for kind of what I do, but one of the things I say is, number one, during a vacation, there has to be a time where you touch the backpack and you think about school. I think that's important, and that doesn't mean you don't get to have vacation. I think people see things as very black and white. It's vacation, I don't need to. It's school, I can't stop. Mm-mm. So one of the things I say is, hey, on the Sunday before you go back from vacation, go look at your calendar, go look at your portal, go check the backpack. And actually, the Sunday before you start every week, make sure that you know what you're going to do. Make sure your family knows. The example, like the parent does not want to hear on a Tuesday night, I need the science fair board. When?
Right.
Tomorrow. Number one, those are not so available because everybody else needs a science fair board. And number two, who wants to go out? So imagine sitting down on a Sunday and saying, let's look at the week. Ooh, the science fair board is due this week. Do I need to get you the board? Yep, I'm going to get it today. So executive function, here's the other thing. It affects the whole system, the whole family. It's not just about the child. It's about everything about what we need. I can't tell you the amount of times. Actually, I do think that printers are still important. I will fight people on this. I think there's time for a screen and time where you print and use the highlighter. And the amount of people go, do you have a printer? Yeah. Does it work? No. Like,
does it have ink in it? Does it?
No, then that's not a tool. That's something that's collecting dust. So making sure that those kind of things are there, because you may not need it all the time. But for a study packet, you do need it because I want that study packet printed. So it affects all these kind of stuff. And here's my ultimate goal. And I've always said this, and I've changed it slightly. It's to balance the have-tos with the want-tos. So for kids, I'll say to balance school with your social life. But for us, it's the have-tos with the want-tos. Nobody likes freedom and downtime more than me. Okay, maybe people like it as much as me. I want as much free time as I can get. Let's be honest. That is really what I want. But in order for that to happen, I've got to really be on my game in other areas. And that's a messaging that I want the kids to get. I want the families to get. I want you to have downtime. I want that kid. I don't have the same moral standing on video games or on tech that a lot of people have. It's time and place. You got to text your friend after the work is done. You got to play your video game when all your stuff is done and your backpack is packed for the next day.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's so many pieces that you have to pay attention to. And like one of the things that you're alluding to is that the task is not done until you've actually shown me that it's done, right? You mentioned that before about show me that the paper's been submitted, that the math homework has been done, that you've hit send, because oftentimes, a lot of students who get distracted, they write the email, they attach the document, but then they never hit send, or they send the email, but the document was never attached that they were supposed to send. And so it's really about rechecking, and sometimes students need additional support and guidance. The other thing you mentioned was that there are these different seasons. We talked about the end of March, early April. There's also standardized testing season. And that adds another layer of responsibilities and things that students need to do and to organize that isn't part of their typical schedule for school. How can parents help kids with organization and time management when they have to navigate this additional task, such as preparing for ICs or SATs or, ACTs, things like that?
Well, I think you bring up a good point, right? Because, there's a big belief, I think, with a lot of people that standardized testing doesn't count and, universities don't really want it. I happen to believe it will come back. The SATs and the ACTs will come back as another indicator for college in addition to grades and letters of recommendation and essays. I do think it'll come back. And I don't think that testing tells the whole story at all. But I think learning how to take a test, which has a time component to it, is an important skill to have. And if we step back and we stop fighting all this, and please, nobody hopefully will come after me. I do believe in accommodations and I do believe in modifications. And I believe that people are more than the test. I really do. But it's a skill to have, just like organizing is a skill to have. You may be better at it or not as good at it as somebody else. So that means that it's not about the moment of the test, or it's not even about the week of the test. So if you're talking about being able to follow through, right? So we talked about homework, and I'll relate it to standardized testing in a moment. Homework doesn't end when the homework's done. Homework ends when it's submitted or it's in the folder and back in the backpack. That's when the homework session ends. So that's important to sort of understand for standardized testing. So standardized testing, that section ends when you've gone through it and you've been able to check it, or you've gone through it and you make sure that there's no blank spaces. So this idea of "and" is really important. The other thing that's important is, again, understanding the sense of time, that time is really two things. Number one is estimating of time. Uh, and number two, it's sort of utilization of time. And in general, estimating of time is really off, particularly for people who have executive functioning. So executive functioning issues. So understanding, even parents going, well, how long do you think it takes to school? I can't tell you the amount of kids that will be really off. 2 minutes, a half an hour, maybe it's a 10-minute drive. So understanding what that estimation is, we used to joke when we were kids, a cartoon was about 10 minutes. Cartoons are not like that anymore. They're certainly cartoonish things, but they're not like that anymore. A half an hour feel like, right? What does it mean to have 45 minutes? How do you even notice that? And the other thing is what happens, if you get confused. You talked a lot about initiation, right? How do we initiate? That's a really hard thing for a lot of people to do. And again, people go backwards, right? So they go, I have homework. And I always say, no. Oh, but I have. We're not arguing that you have homework. You do. Number one, we look at the portal because we do it a certain way. Number two, we make a to-do list. We do that a certain way. Number three, it's the homework assignment. Pull that out, and then it's homework. That there's a process to doing something. Because if not, people sort of jump in at the wrong spot. And number four, let's bring it back to self-regulation, right? We want to be in the best part of our mind for the optimal effect, right? It's really the frontal lobe over here, right? How do we get in our best self? We get in our best self to make sure that we have enough sleep, to make sure that we're fueling our body, to make sure that we're hydrated, to make sure that we're comfortable, right? Are we sitting in a good seat that works for us? All of that, you have to notice that. Oh, I'm not having a good day. Well, it's because my friend wouldn't sit with me at lunch. Let's notice it. Let's name it. Or, you know what? I feel really good today. I've had kids go, I had the best night's sleep. School was great. I said, yeah, a lot of sleep issues, sort of coming on with kids. So all of that can help with standardized testing. I think people look at it as a time rather than what skills do kids need to be successful with standardized testing, and what are we doing along the way?
Hello, I'm taking a short break to tell you about one of our Child Nexus partners, Park Century School. Does your child have difficulty focusing? Are they struggling with reading or other academic subjects? Do they have difficulty processing information? At Park Century School, they specialize in supporting students in grades K through 8 who learn differently, and their program is designed to meet each child's needs. Park Century School is currently accepting applications for all grades. For more information, visit their website at parkcenturyschool.org or call their director of admissions, Cindy, at 661-434-4807. Now back to our conversation. I think that that's so important. The idea that it's not even about kind of what the score is on the standardized test, even though that might be important to get into a particular university, but it's really paying attention to the skill that they're developing in preparing for that standardized test. And I think the same is true for homework and managing all of your classes. You're learning to prioritize when you've got an assignment due, you've got a report due, you've got a test and a quiz. How do you prioritize your time? How do you organize your time? How do you plan for things that are due in the future? And so you're building those skills. So it's not even about what the math assignment was and what the paper, the content of the paper, even though that's important as well. I think the bigger skill is how do you organize all of the things that you need to do so that you can execute and complete them and then feel good about what you've submitted at the end of the day.
100%. It really is all about the how and the why. And I think that that's important. It's interesting you mentioned the word priority, because one of the things that I will teach the kids is, or adults, this idea of a priority trap. And the priority trap is something like this. The math teacher doesn't care that you have a paper due. And the English teacher doesn't care that you have a math test. Because what people will do, particularly students, is they'll make false priorities. So when you're an executive function coach, you're listening for what they say. They'll say, well, my priority this week is the math test, meaning I'm going to do that and sort of ignore everything else. So it's how do you balance those things? Not that that's your that might be your priority and it's important, but so is getting the math. Well, but I got the paper. You still got to balance it. So being able to break things down along the way, being able to utilize time, being able to have enough time. I think that's a lot of the times where it starts. The kids don't have enough time. They have a half an hour and they're off to something else, or they have put a false thing. Like I had one student who said, I only do a half an hour. That's all I'm willing to give. Okay. But, you can't get it all done. Are you interested in college? Yeah. I want to go. Well, then we have to start to do a mind shift, right? How do we do a mindset shift? That becomes important too, because a half an hour when you're in 10th and 11th grade, although I appreciate the energy during that half an hour, it's not enough. So there's a lot of complicated skills. It isn't just, is my backpack organized? It isn't just, did I study for my test? It's really the how. And then it's understanding the why. Why do I have to do it? And that's something that kids don't always think about.
And that's why executive functioning, it's an extremely important skill, but it's also not one skill. It's a number of different skills. And when you talk about all of the different things, we've mentioned, awareness of time management, organization, planning, prioritizing, and you talked about self-regulation. And also when I'd heard you talk about having these different things due. We've been mentioning the math and then also the paper. It's self-awareness becomes important as well, because if you know that you're weaker in math, you also know that you need extra time to prepare for that math test than you might need to prepare for a paper. So having that self-awareness to know that I need to plan because, I need extra time to prepare because this is not my area of strength, right?
And I think that that's a really good point. It's having the time and it's breaking down the task, right, into pieces. So today I'm only going to work on this, or tomorrow I'm going to do just this piece. Self-awareness comes from an important part of executive functioning is the follow through, but it's also the self-reflection, which is executive functioning skill that a lot of people don't get, because self-reflection is not just that I do it or not. It can be that for little kids, but it's really thinking about, you have preview and review, right? How did I really do? Ooh, I cut it down to the wire. Or I had a kid once say, yeah, the paper was this. It would have been higher if I had the time to revise. And I said, yeah, exactly. So that was actually pretty self-reflective of that kid in terms of time. Yeah, that is. So being able to really self-reflect. And then the highest point is when I'm faced with the same situation next time, how am I going to change it? But starting with that ability to what went well or what went to plan and what didn't go to plan, or what do you know about yourself, I think is really important. I agree 100%.
Again, like you're saying, I agree with everything you're saying. The self-reflection, self-awareness are such important executive functioning skills that also need to be nurtured and need to develop because they interact with everything else. They interact with the organization, the planning, all of the other things we've been talking about. When I think about kind of where we are right now, we talked about recording in March. spring is around the corner. Spring brings extracurricular commitments. There are plays. There are, different sports activities, school projects, and also a bit of spring fever. How do you help students stay motivated and avoid procrastination? Because I think that's a huge issue around this time.
Ooh, the P word, procrastination. I love it. So I'll say a couple of things that maybe the people who are listening to may agree or not agree. Procrastination has been also, it's now a catch-all, and it's something that people fall on. Well, I have issues with procrastination, or I have time blindness. And it's okay to have issues with things. I think there's a couple of things. Number one, procrastination has 4 or 5, could be more, different sort of points it emanates from. Are you avoiding the task? Or are you over busy, right? So there's people that procrastinate because they're overcommitted, and there's people that procrastinate because it gives them anxiety. So you have to sort of figure out, where does the procrastination come from? That's number one, because it can be different. It can be a mix of all. But, I've worked with students, just to give an example that's very concrete, come a long way, did all the work, just never do the physics work, until the pressure was on, and then the anxiety, and then the physics work got done. So there's procrastination based around a certain subject. So you can have that as well. Spring fever, I think, happens to all of us. I think it happens to educators as well. I know it happens to me. Like, I get excited. I know my summer schedule is going to be different. I think that's where the schedule comes in. When you have a solid schedule and you have those solid times and you have your calendaring system so you know what's going on, it's a little bit of those guardrails that help against procrastination. Certainly, you can misuse the time. I understand you can have that time and you can misuse it. But when it's in your schedule, go back to self-awareness, your self-awareness or your self-talk becomes really powerful. So being able to say, like I said, in a couple of days, it's going to be light at 6:00, right? It's not cold and dark. We want to be in the house, baby. I want to be out. Saying to myself, okay, all I have to do is do my work from 4 to 6, and then I can do what I want. So those messages that we're giving, the self-messaging, really do help with procrastination. If those things aren't working and people hold on to procrastination, they hold on to, I can't focus, I'm procrastinating, it's just who I am. Then we're talking a little more, some of the why we do coaching, which I can sort of get into in a minute. But a lot of it is that accountability. How am I holding myself accountable? Do I need an accountability partner in this? And there are times, just depending on how I do it, I am the kid's accountability partner. In fact, if I can, and I got a kid rolling, I'll keep them on a session, but I'll mute myself and I'll take myself off the camera. I'll do my own thing. I'm not charging anymore for that session. And they're just working. Why? Because I know that I'm kind of on the other end. But helping yourself be accountable is a muscle that needs to be developed. And it's directly related to procrastination. Look, sometimes, it is hard to start. People procrastinate because they can't start. And once they get started, they're fine. Other people can start, but then peter out. Some people can start and do, but they just can't wrap it up. So sometimes the coaching takes you from here further. It doesn't sort of delve, in my opinion, doesn't delve into kind of why you are who you are. It's like, okay, let's go. Just like a baseball coach doesn't go, well, why can't you really, shoot and flick the wrist? They don't care. They're like, you need to flick the wrist. Let's go. Practice 100 times and now 100 times like this and this. That coaching's the same thing. So it's like, I understand that procrastination is difficult, but let's start. Let's go. And that's what the coaching does.
Yes. And what you're doing is you're really identifying and then addressing the underlying issue that's contributing to the procrastination. And it can, like you're saying, it can be different for different people.
And you're doing it in real time. And that's the coaching. It's like I say to people, most people know what to do at the gym. Why do they hire a coach to go 1, 2, great job? Because that's what they need at the moment. And you know what? It's not the worst thing in the world, because we as adults do pay for things like that. We pay for a batting coach. We pay for, private lessons in tennis. So it's the same mindset. I think people need to get over that. It's not necessarily therapeutic. It's the same mindset. Let's coach you. How long? That's the magic question, right?
Right. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the coaching, because your book offers incredible tools, but some students benefit from additional support, right? Having the tools, and you mentioned this, having the tools is not enough. Knowing what tools you need to use is not enough. There are times when you need an executive functioning coach for additional guidance and support while you're developing those skills. When should parents consider executive functioning coaching for their child?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because, like I said, I think in a lot of assessments that I read that are done by amazing people, they really are getting a diagnosis of executive functioning disorder now. And it's hot, right? And I think that when parents come and they talk about it, there's this feeling of you can come and fix it, right? And it's not 100%, I can come and fix it. It's the skills. Let me teach you the skills and the strategies and show you the tools. And then number two, let me do the coaching. So here's what I always say. Everything I say on all of my social media, in my books, I give away everything I teach. So it's not like all of this one thing, but I'm holding back and I'm teaching secret things. I'm not. It's all the same. So why am I comfortable doing it? Because I know that 90% of the population isn't going to do it on their own without coaching. And the 10% that can, go for it. Like, I think it's great. Or if somebody goes, oh, I want to listen to this and I want to try and do this, or I'm a teacher, I'm going to put something in. By the way, the book is excellent for educators as well, not just parents. I just think that it could be in schools, and every month it could be part of the faculty bulletin and part of the faculty works on. That's just a little plug there. But, the coaching really comes from when a parent says, I tried to do this, or I've showed him this and it hasn't worked, or if there's a good example. Sometimes the coaching, quite frankly, it saves the parent-child relationship. I've had parents say, I'm a professional organizer. I'm a professional organizer, but I can't organize with my kid. Great, get coaching. Other times it's like, I can't fight with my kid about one more thing. Other times it's like, I don't know how to help my kid because guess what? I have difficulty telling time and sort of managing myself and my upset. So those are sort of basic areas. If there's really no skills and strategies, then you can start with that. What happens? Like, I've had some families where I've done 6-7 sessions. They've said, just teach the strategies. And the kids are really kind of good. They just picked up a couple of things in the toolbox and off they went. More often than not, it's the coaching. Now, when the magical question, how long? There's some kids I've coached for 6 weeks and some kids I'm on year 5. It just depends on where they are in school and what they need. I will say that often people will get it together and move forward, but every time there's a big shift, meaning I got it, but now I'm in high school. I got it, but now I'm in college. I got it, but now I'm in life, right? Because sometimes you coach adults and they very proudly go, look at this. Isn't this great? They told me everything I need to do to perform better at work, and it's a performance improvement plan. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, it's a little bit of a red flag. And they're going, isn't this great? I'm like, yeah, great, but let's get moving on all this. It can be for a long time. What I like to do, and everybody is different. Like, some people do an hour of coaching a week. Some people do like 3 hours a week for like 6 weeks. And then that's the whole thing. I do it differently. So I typically do like 2 30-minute sessions. I like to book in terms of the coaching. And then what I do is, once I think it's going, we can sometimes go into check-ins, which are 15-minute sessions. Right. So it's not about stopping. I think that we do see, I think almost every executive function will say, if you stop too soon, it's just not going to work. It really isn't. And it's not about the grades. I can get kids higher grades like that. But if it's not going to stay, that's where it's a problem. Hopefully that answered your question.
It did. And it will answer the question that many people have. I mean, Michelle, I love the idea of structuring executive functioning skills around the school year, which is what your book outlines beautifully. It makes so much sense. And I know our listeners are going to find the strategies in that book incredibly helpful. But I also know that so many students that I have assessed need that executive functioning coaching, because it's all about building skills, and you and your team do that so well. If listeners want to find your book, if they want to connect with you and your team for more resources or coaching, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, that's great. It's been really great talking about. So number one, on Amazon, I have my 2 ebooks, and I think they're reasonably priced, and they're on Amazon, so you can get them and download them. And then just use what you want to use. And like any other how-to book, it's not a one and done. You might want to go back to it every month. You might want to read through it and then read through it again that same week. So that's one place. In terms of getting a hold of me, my website is probably the best. It's michelleporjes.org. And I'm in the process of updating it a little bit, but you'll see some great articles on there, some blogs, which is free. Take it, read it, think about it. And you can also get a hold of me and have a consultation. You can look into coaching. I am fairly busy. I usually have limited time. I did hire an apprentice this year to do some virtual Zoom coaching as well. But I'm always happy to help people out and talk about executive functioning.
Wonderful. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us again. And thanks for all the support that you give to so many students. It's been such a pleasure chatting again.
It is always my pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you all for listening. If you found today's episode helpful, make sure to check out Michelle's book, Navigating the Yearly Calendar, Executive Functioning Month by Month Guidebook. It's available on Amazon, and we'll link to it in the show notes. And remember, even with great strategies in place, executive functioning coaching can be a powerful tool for students who need more support. If today's conversation resonated with you, take time to explore additional resources at childnexus.com. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.